Hello everyone, welcome to the God of War 2 review. This is the remastered version on the PlayStation 3, as with the first one. I didn't mention that the last time. Just as a precursor warning, if you haven't played God of War 1 and you want to play it, go jump in now, because I feel like I'm going to spoil some stuff. I don't plan on it, but it will most definitely turn up. And if you don't want to play the game, you just want to get caught up and actually watch this video, I do have a review for the first one. I'm not as proud of that one. I'll explain why in a second. But I think it does a pretty good job of explaining what the game is and if you'd like it or not. So when it comes to why I'm not proud of that one, it's a bit more scripted. I don't really like that style, to be honest. I found out I don't like it. So I'm going to try this. It's a little bit more conversational. We'll just read through some notes. We'll talk about the game. If you like it, let me know. Leave a comment or something like that. Let me know by leaving a like or a dislike. I don't care, whichever one. Help me improve. And then maybe we'll actually have a conversation about it in the comments as well. We'll actually talk about what we liked and disliked about this game. So, all of this stuff out of the way, let's jump into the game. So when the game starts up, Kratos is still very much God of War, but he's been very, very busy. He's been taking his Spartan army and sieging many Greek states all across Greece. Athena warns him and says that the gods aren't happy about this, and if you keep it up, I ain't going to be able to protect you. Kratos don't care. He looks her dead in the eye and he's like, I don't owe you anything. Jumps straight down to the city, begins pillaging. I believe it's the Isle of Rhodes or City of Rhodes. Then Athena knows that he's doing it. She then takes away most of his powers and puts him into this big old colossal statue that stands in front of the city. That's your new task for the day. Zeus tells him, if you use the Blade of Olympus, put all of your power into it, it'll be strong enough to defeat this colossal titan. So you do that. You defeat it, and then Kratos gets cocky and he starts screaming to the gods. He thinks he's big man, and then this thing smacks the crap out of him. Loses all of his power. He's on the verge of death because he's a mortal man. All of his power's inside this blade. So you've got to find this Blade of Olympus. So the game starts off with its theme of new interactive cinematic moments, and you've got to kind of hovel over to this blade. But then, out of nowhere, Zeus appears. Turns out the guy's betrayed you as well. So what's happening? He picks up the blade and he absolutely gouges him. Just completely destroys him with it. Sends him to the underworld. When you're in the underworld, you're climbing your way up. Gaia wakes you up. Gaia, the mother of Titans, who turns out is the narrator from the last game. She brings it back and says, you know what? We can defeat Zeus together. I just need your help. So you go on a quest to find the Sisters of Fate so that you can change your fate. Now, let's talk about the way that this game is presented. Because for a PlayStation 2 game, I was actually pretty impressed. The game is actually really pretty. Despite its age, Kratos still looks really good as well. At some points, the light hits him just right and he actually looks like he's some kind of early PlayStation 3 concept model. I was really impressed by it, to be honest. Let's talk about the gameplay now. Now this game was so much harder than the first one was. Now I know in the review I said for the first game that it wasn't much of a challenge and that you could change the difficulty setting. I played through this second game on normal mode, and there was some parts of it where I was getting my absolute buttocks whooped. I was red raw by the end of some sections. I was pleading for death. It was so ridiculously hard. Maybe I'm just bad at the game. Fair enough. I can understand that. I haven't really played hack and slash games before. I'm not really familiar with the formula. I'm not great at it. But this is the only game ever for when it comes up on that screen and says, you know what, it looks like you're struggling. Do you want to go to easy mode? This is the only game I've been like, yes please help me, please do this for me. Whilst this game is pretty hard, the fighting still feels solid, and there's actually some significant improvements that are made. There's just other parts that are downfalls as well. It's a very mixed bag. So it still feels good. There's new combo moves that are added, and they actually feel pretty good as well. But there's new weapons that are added, which are the biggest switch up to the game. There's an extra weapon that you get in God of War 1. But it doesn't really switch up gameplay in the way that you think. And I think with this game they wanted it to switch up the gameplay even more, but I don't feel like it did. So Athena's blades are just the blades of chaos from the first game, but then there's the barbarian's hammer, there's a spear of destiny, and then you also have the Blade of Olympus, which you get to use in very select sections of the game. And I gotta be honest, I didn't really use the barbarian's hammer because although it's mega strong, it's super slow and you can't roll when you're using it. You feel like you're really hindered when you're actually trying to fight with this thing. Spear of Destiny's fine, but it doesn't... None of them actually have like an expanded move set. It's like none of them have had the same amount of time put into them as Athena's blades, or the more commonly known Blades of Chaos, have had it put into them. So it just feels a lot more fun to use the Blades of Chaos, and there's no like good way to switch between them, so it feels a little bit clunky when you're switching between the weapons. The mechanics are expanded though, so now you can actually grapple using your Blades of Chaos. You can swing across the land, you can use them for puzzles, which are actually really fun. And you've also got the ability to glide when you get through a certain section of the game. It's not a spoiler, I won't tell you who you get the gliding ability from, because that would be a spoiler. You also got new magical abilities. You get Typhon's Bow, Kronos' Rage, the Head of Urael, Atlas's Quake, and then you've also got the Rage of Titans. So we'll start off with Rage of the Titans. Rage of the Titans is pretty much just Rage of the Gods from the first game, except this time you take damage when you're using it, which is a nice little trade-off, and it builds up a lot quicker as well. However, it gets on my nerves, and I'll talk about that a little bit later. Atlas's Quake, that's a good new one. It's a ground and pound attack, good for spreading all the enemies about. Kronos' Rage is good as well. It's a nice electrical attack, you chuck it into the middle of enemies, and then there's an arc of electricity or lightning that springs between the enemies, and then the more that you get into the close proximity of the lightning, the more people that you attach, and then it really racks up your combo. Typhon's Bow though is pretty much just the same bow from the last game, and then the Head of Urael, I believe I'm saying that right. It's a Gorgon head. It's a big boss that you cut off the head of, and it's exactly the same as Medusa's Gaze, so I didn't use that one in this game either. That was kind of annoying, that the Head of Urael and Typhon's Bow, they're pretty much exactly the same as powers from the last game. So it feels a little bit lazy, but I understand that you can't reinvent the wheel all the time. Another good new feature is the Golden Fleece. It's used for parrying. Now I believe you could parry in the first game if memory serves me correctly. However, it's expanded upon this time. You get a couple of new moves for when you're parrying, and you can reflect projectiles. So somebody shoots something at you, you can reflect that back. One of the best features of it is if you time it right for a Gorgon's Gaze, instead of turning to stone, you reflect it and you turn everyone in the area to stone. And then you can smack the crap out of everybody and destroy them with a couple of easy hits. Really enjoyed that one, that's a good bit of game design. I want to talk about the enemies in this game as well, just for a second. There's loads of new enemy types in the game, which I appreciate. There's absolutely loads of them. I feel like I was going around every corner and there was a new one that I'd never seen before. Some of them are reskins, but some of them are straight up brand new, and I thought that was really good. However, this game fell back into the trap that I think the last game fell into, and that was just too many enemies on screen at once. There's too much going on and it becomes a bit of a pylon. There's one part in the game where you're in this little arena style format and there's these big three-headed dogs. Now, one or two of them I can consider like manageable. Three of them gets a little bit difficult. However, by the end of this little section, there are like 6 of them on screen at once. And it's not just them either. There's these other big dudes that you got to fight as well. So, I would think maybe the best way to get around this is using the Rage of the Titans. But the abilities of it are inconsistent. I'm racking up like over 100 times, maybe 200 times combo, and it's not doing anything. Nobody's dying quick enough. And there's another section towards the end of the game as well. This is the section that made me go on easy mode. I've never done that in a game before. I understand I might be bad at the game, but I feel like it's chucking quite a bit at me. There's this one bit where you're kind of going down this ramp. This isn't a spoiler, by the way. It's near the end of the game, but I won't say where it is or how it comes to fruition. But you're going down this ramp, and then it's cut into sections, and then these walls will come up. First off, if these walls come up, you're segregated and you're stuck with a certain bunch of enemies. But if they come up at the wrong time, you're stuck by yourself. So you've just got to stand there and wait for everybody to be done with it. Then, when you actually get in there, the fights are fine. Especially the first 1 or 2 fights when you go down this ramp. However, you get to a point where you're like, okay, that's got to be it now. I have fought a lot of crap on the way down. And there isn't any chest to kind of replenish me and get me back up to a level playing field. Then, you keep going, and there's more. There's just more. And they chuck more and more on the screen at you until it just becomes so disgusting. It really upset me. There's so much going on the screen, and it really like soured a lot of the taste because it's close to the end of the game, and I've already gone through quite a bit of this game with inconveniences because I found some parts of it, I don't know, it sounds a bit wussy, I found some of the parts of it like just too hard. It really broke up the experience, and I'm trying to learn how to play this game. Like, I'm not terrible at it, but there's just some parts that are just so much. Back to the Rage of the Titans. So throughout the game, these big old rock monsters, they pop up every now and then. The first one, I used Rage of the Titans on it, and I smacked the crap out of it. It was done maybe in like 30 seconds to a minute. It was actually a pretty quick boss fight. I felt satisfied because I'd saved up my ability and I'd used it at the right time. But there's this one where it's clearly meant to be its own boss fight. So I'm using Rage of the Titans and I've probably racked up like a 200 time combo and nothing has happened. So I die and I try again, get to the second stage of this boss fight, and I rack up that same amount of combo and nothing happens again. It's like something's waiting to be triggered, so it completely nullifies the ability that is Rage of the Titans in favour of trying to push through something else. I understand that stuff might have been set up, but it doesn't feel like anything's set out past this first certain point. So I'm using this ability and nothing's getting done. It just really soured the use of the ability later on down the road. It felt like, what's the point of using it if I'm just going to have to wait for some other kind of event to take place before I can really do some damage with it. Something I was actually quite impressed by though was the boss fights. In the first game, I think a lot of them were very void of challenge. There was nothing really difficult about any of them. They were pretty lackluster on the whole. But this game has so many more boss fights and they are such a massive improvement over the first game. I've really got to give props to developers on that. It's really, really evident in the way that this is designed. There's one where one guy is invisible and it's an easy boss fight, but it's fun. He's invisible, so you got to see the splashes in the water. It's just a fun little thing to have to go through. There's also one that takes place towards the very end of the game. Again, no spoilers, but I will talk about it in the spoiler section at the end. And it's a really good example of how to build up the player, give them a whole bunch of mechanics, and then throw a whole bunch of stuff at them where they have to use every single mechanic in their arsenal. It's a really good example of great gameplay design. There's also another one that is completely out of nowhere. It comes after this little scene. I'll explain more about this in the spoiler section as well, but it just doesn't make any sense why it's there. I want to take a second to talk about the platforming and the puzzles as well. Platforming in this game is actually, it's fine now. The first game I felt was really inconvenienced by the camera movement, but this one, it really stepped this game up. The camera not only aids in cinematic set pieces, but it also aids in the platforming, and I didn't find any part of it to be annoying this time around. Also, with the new glide mechanic and having the new grappling mechanic chucked in there as well, the platform is actually pretty fun. I found that I was actually looking forward to the next time I'd have to swing from hook to hook. It was a good addition to the game. The puzzles, on the other hand, I think they're the only way to say it is they're terrible. Like, they're really not good. Some of them are fine. They're just there. Others are just annoying. There's this one where you've got to pull a chain to operate an elevator, and then if you don't pull it fast enough, the spike ceiling is going to come down and crush you. That on its own is fine. Then there's enemies that they add to the mix as well. Again, adding enemies where they don't need to be added. And because you've got to smack the circle button so often, I mean, you've got to do it really fast just to get a fluid animation going. It wore me out. I know it's just my thumb and that sounds pathetic, but I honestly found it was becoming harder and harder after each try. There's another one that involves the Amulet of Fates that you get in the game. Don't worry, that's not a spoiler, but it's this little thing that you get that lets you slow down time in certain areas for puzzles. And you have to turn this crank and then slow down time and run across this spiked floor so that you can get to this gate that opens up. But what the game does is it puts this little secret area in, so if you knock down the wall, you go in and you get to open up the chests and you get rewarded. However, this means you have to go back and forth multiple times on this spiked floor, and then you have to wait for the actual slowdown timer to run out. It's just annoying. It's just repetitive. It's not actually fun. And that's a big theme of what these puzzles do. A lot of them aren't fun, they're just inconveniences. Okay, that's enough about the puzzles for now. I want to move on to the quick time events. So the first game, they're actually quite fun. I thought they was going to overstep the mark, but they really didn't. They just save for the end of a fight, or the end of a boss fight, and then you just press a few buttons, get to see a cool animation, and you're rewarded with maybe extra health or some extra magic. That's good. And I think for the lion's share of God of War 2, you can describe them the same way. However, right at the end of the game, again, no spoilers, I will talk about it in the spoiler section, but no spoilers here, it just kind of ruins it. There's this part where it looks like you're about to be fed the cutscene with a massive possibility of quick time events. So I was ready for it. However, I think it goes on for maybe a few buttons too long. For the end of the game, they're supposed to convey a really kind of loud and impactful message. It soured that note. It got to the point where I had failed it a few times, and now I just don't care. It looked like a really cool thing in the beginning, and I wish that I'd only had to press 1 or 2 buttons. Instead I'm pressing 5 over a long period of this cutscene, and it just completely ruined any sort of pacing that this section had, and really soured the note. But I'll talk about it a little bit more in the spoiler section. Okay, let's talk about the story now for a moment. On the whole, I did actually enjoy the story. I know I'm going on and on about how there were things about the game that I didn't like, but on the whole I did actually enjoy it. Story gets off to a good start. You get this betrayal and you see what you have to do, what quests you have to go on to fix this betrayal. It's a good bit of motivation for Kratos, even though it is pretty much exactly the same as the last game. It's just revenge. But the game really does start to meander in the middle, and I feel like maybe 1 or 2 hours of the game could be cut out to really tighten the experience. Because you know that you have to get to the Sisters of Fate, but you don't get there maybe a good 6 to 8 hours after you find out that's when you're supposed to get there. I get that it's supposed to be the end goal, but you're doing all of these little miniature tasks in the middle to try and get there. And it feels like a lot of busy work. There's also a twist at the end of the game, which don't worry, I'm not going to spoil, but we'll talk about it a little bit later. There's a twist that feels very forced. I understand the need for it, and I understand the message that it's trying to convey. However, it's very cliche, but it does give a little bit of extra motivation for Kratos, and it does make you feel for him just a little bit more. Okay, now we're about to jump into the spoiler section. So if you don't want anything spoiled and you still want to play the game for yourself, jump out now. I would recommend that you play the game. Even though I've had a bad time with it at some points, it's still a good play. It's not too bad. First thing I want to talk about is the Kraken boss fight. This was the boss fight I was talking about that just comes out of nowhere. Forgive me if I missed something, but this thing just pops up out of nowhere. Doesn't make any sense. I think it's supposed to amplify the sense that Kratos is so mad in this moment that he doesn't even notice this massive monster. So some context for this is that you've just killed one of Kratos' Spartans. He's like the last Spartan left. And you kill him by accident because it was in a dark room and you're both competing to get an audience with the Sisters of Fate. That's understandable. Then he goes into a shop. Goes into this shop where he's stomping around like a child. It's actually annoying. Like, I didn't want to play the game anymore because I was playing as this protagonist that got so upset that he threw a tantrum. The actual boss fight though, is fine. It just didn't make any sense. Why is it here? Another boss fight I want to talk about is the Sisters of Fate boss fight. This is a good boss fight. It was one I mentioned earlier that lets you use all of the mechanics that you've claimed throughout the game. There's these hooks along the ceiling. You've got to swing across them to avoid this big area of effect attack that one of them lets out. You have to parry so that you can reflect these projectiles they shoot at you. It's just a great example of how to do gameplay design right. And then there's like multiple sections to it as well. So when you defeat the first sister, you have to go fight the second one. And that's a good set piece. It takes place where the end of the first one happened. So you're on top of this big sword that was the bridge that Kratos picks up to kill Ares. It's just fun. It's just a good bit of fun. And then when you defeat her, you got to go back and fight both of them. It's awesome. This brings me to a boss fight that isn't so good. So Zeus, the final boss fight, it's just lame. It's just not a good boss fight. Zeus is giant and he's throwing enemies at you, which is fine this time, it's not terrible. However, he throws down sirens, and when you kill the sirens, it hurts Zeus. But he keeps spawning these sirens, it doesn't make any sense. Why are you doing this to yourself, boy? Because all you're doing is hurting yourself. It kind of annoyed me that you kept doing it. And then, towards the end of the fight, Kratos is like, you know what, I surrender. Kratos is clearly going to trick him. Cutscene is triggered, but it's pretty evident that you're going to have to do a quick time event. And this is the quick time event that I was talking about earlier that kind of soured the end of the game. So I know a quick time event's coming, it's pretty obvious. I get the first couple presses, but then it just keeps going. It just keeps going on and on and on. And I really felt like this would have been better if you just gave me a cutscene. It's supposed to be the final big revelation of the game, and you ruined it by leaving it up to me, this person that doesn't know what they're doing. Now, again, I know that this is quite possibly my fault because I've messed up. So I'm not going to blame the developers on this one. However, did really sour the ending of the game for me. Also, this brings about the final twist of the game. I do feel like this is a bit forced. So, turns out Kratos is Zeus's son. Cool. That's fine. And don't get me wrong, I understand the message. I understand the message 100%. There's a cycle. Zeus killed his dad, and now he's trying to kill his son to break the cycle of father killing son. And the son almost kills the father because Kratos is stabbing the crap out of Zeus, but then Athena jumps out of nowhere and sacrifices herself. And then Kratos goes back, brings the Titans back. It's all good. It's actually not a bad story. The twist itself, it feels cliche, and Kratos has like almost no reaction to it, so it doesn't feel fantastic. However, it is a pretty good cliffhanger. At the end, you bring back the Titans, and you're on Gaia's back, and you're about to go up to Mount Olympus and destroy him. And it says God of War will return. That's a great cliffhanger. And despite having like a really sour experience just before with the QuickTime event, again, my fault, I had a sour experience with it. Despite that, it leaves on a high note. It leaves on this note of there's a lot of good stuff coming and I can't wait to do it. What a great way to end the game. When all is said and done with God of War 2, I actually liked the game. I actually did enjoy it. Whilst there are some sections that really upset me, really infuriate me, I have to take a step back and think maybe, you know what, I'm not as good at the game as I need to be to play the game. However, there are definitely some sections where the game throws far too many enemies at you and the puzzle design is lackluster at best. The story is good overall, and I think again, this is what saved the game for me, that real driving force to get through this next section to see where the story develops. Even though the story isn't this fantastic revelation, it's just another story of revenge. I do think, however, that this game could really benefit with cutting maybe an hour or two out of it and trimming the experience so the pacing is much more consistent throughout, rather than having a good beginning, a really slow middle, and then an ending that is just absolutely breakneck. That doesn't mean it's a bad thing though. I actually really enjoyed the ending and it really put me in a place that made me want to play the next game, and I was really excited to jump into the next one. So that's going to do it for this video, guys. Thanks very much for watching. Thank you for sticking with all of my voice cracks, my what I can only assume is terrible gameplay, all of my whining about how this game is too hard for me. Feel free to tell me to get good down in the comments. I don't mind it if you think that that's a serious issue with the review and that I didn't consider that, you know, I just wasn't good at the game enough. I know I said it a few times, but if you don't think I really drove that point home hard enough, feel free to let me know. So the next review, God of War 3, and then we're going to be doing Ascension, and then the 2 PSP games. And that's not the order that they came out in, but it's the order I'm going to play them in. Look forward to those, or don't, you know. But let me know what you think of this format as well. I like it, it's a lot better, for me anyway, but if you think it needs to be kind of stripped down a bit, be more concise, more to the point, I understand that, and I'll see what I can do. Also, if you did like it, leave a like, I would appreciate that. If you're looking forward to another review of God of War or another review of another game in the future, don't worry, I'm not just going to be a God of War guy, then consider subscribing, because I'm actually really enjoying this and I'm going to try and keep everything regular. I want to do Tuesday and Friday uploads, so look forward to those. Thanks for watching again, thanks for really sticking with me. I'll see you in the next one.